Okay, so yesterday we were talking about, with the Amitabha sadhana, yeah, if the mind is defiled, the land is defiled. If a negative thought comes to mind, many obstacles appear. If a good thought arises, peace is everywhere. Thus, heaven and hell are all in one's own mind. Okay, so it doesn't mean in your mind, like your mind is all that exists. It's not that. It means it's created by mind, which means that it depends on the mind. Okay, and so in particular, it depends on the mind that conceives and designates objects. Yeah, and so of course that depends on how we look at the objects. And when our mind has a lot of defilements, we look at things in a really grumpy, distorted way, and then everything looks blah to us. Okay, so the difference, this is again according to the Chinese masters, but I'll explain it, according to our tradition. The difference between Buddhas and sentient beings is not in their ultimate nature. They are equal in that regard. Okay, so when we look at the ultimate nature, the empty nature of the mind, our mind is empty of inherent existence. The Buddha's mind is empty of inherent existence. There's absolutely no difference between the emptinesses when you have direct realization of emptiness. So that's not the difference between our minds and Buddha's mind. Yeah. The level of defilement and purity differs, however, and on this basis, Buddhas and sentient beings are distinguished. Okay, so that's the essence of it. On the conventional level, the mind that exists on the conventional level, yeah, in the case of sentient beings, it's covered with layers of obscuration. So our afflictions, the seeds of the afflictions, the latencies of the afflictions, the seeds of karma. So all this covers the pure nature of the mind. In the case of highly realized beings, they've begun to extract and remove all of that obscuration. And at Buddhahood, then, the obscuration is removed. All the good qualities are developed. And the pure nature of the mind really shines forth. So the mind is kind of like the ground. Yeah. When we talk about samsara and nirvana, they aren't places. We don't go to samsara or go to nirvana, Nirvana's 3 clouds up and 1 to the left, It's not like that. But yeah, it's, the mind is what creates samsara. The mind is what creates nirvana, okay? According to our thought, basically. Yeah. I remember Lama Zopa saying something, I can't remember it exactly, but it was like, our experience is on the tip of a thought. Yeah. That is just kind of what's going on in the mind that determines our experience, whether we're in samsara with all of its dukkha or nirvana, with the bliss of liberation. Mm-hmm. So we need a very strong cleaning agent to purify our minds and remove the junk. Okay, so again, the purifying agent is not something external. We can't take Ajax and, sprinkle it on and scrub. Yeah, but it's interesting. I think sometimes our wish for internal purity comes out as cleaning the environment. Yeah. And I think how we keep our environment indicates how we feel about ourselves. Yeah, if our environment is a mess around us, it's probably the reflection of a kind of disorganized or messy mind. If our environment is neat and tidy, it's a reflection of a mind that values that. However, having said that, I remember one time when I was living in Singapore, one nun took me to her room. Her new room was spotless. I mean, nothing lying outside, just totally organized, spotless. And then she said, she wanted to show me her cupboards, and she opened them, and everything was neatly stacked, but they were chock-a-block full. Yeah. So it was interesting to me. External, neat, hardly anything. Internal, lots of stuff. Yeah, even though it was neatly packed. Yeah. So I think, how we keep our environment influences our mind, and the state of our mind influences how we keep our environment too. Okay. But the thing is that just cleaning externally is not going to clean the mind. Okay. So, of course, when we clean externally, we can think, and this is part of the Mahayana thought training practice, I'm cleaning the defilements from the minds of sentient beings. We think like that because that helps us remember compassion and love and transform an ordinary action into a dharma action. But just cleaning alone without thinking about that gets the room clean or the dishes clean, but it doesn't do anything for our mind. Okay, so then Han Shan, one of the Pure Land masters, he said, one who can practice Buddha recitation, and remember Buddha recitation means meditation on the Buddha, not just reciting the mantra, okay? Or it could mean either or, or both. So one who can practice Buddha recitation and then observe where his or her Buddha comes from and where his or her Buddha goes will, over a period of time, come to understand what Buddhahood is. This will open their mind, allow bright wisdom to flow forth from their mind ground. Mind ground means the Buddha nature, the ultimate nature of the mind. But sincere practice and hard work are necessary. If you can really separate yourself from defilements, or as the sutras say, if the mind is pure and bright, and you have arrived at the stage where no obstacles of adventitious afflictions are in your way, not only will Amitabha Buddha come to lead you to rebirth in the Pure Land, but all Buddhas throughout the 10 directions will praise you. Okay, so if we can practice meditation and recitation of mantra, and then observe, where our Buddha comes from and where our Buddha goes. Yeah. What do you think that means? Is there some Buddha sitting inside of us that pops up sometimes, says hi, and then disappears? Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's talking mostly here about, our good qualities and our realizations. And do they come up? And what makes them come up? And what makes them vanish from our awareness sometimes? Yeah, how come we can be so compassionate one day and the next day we're brutal? Yeah, our Buddha comes and our Buddha goes. Okay. Yeah, so we got to hang on to our Buddha, but you don't do that with a rope. Okay. So he's saying, if we can notice that, how do we cultivate the good qualities? How do we overcome the defilements? And what makes us lose our attention to that and lose the mindfulness of it and become complacent or negligent, So if we can understand all that, then we can come to understand better what Buddhahood is and how to transform our mind into that state. Okay, so he says this will open his bright mind, will open his mind, allowing bright wisdom to flow forth from his mind ground. Okay, so when we can do this, then, like if we activate our wisdom and we get it going, it's like a stream, it will continue. But he says, but sincere practice and hard work are necessary. Ah, shucks. I thought finally we were going to get sudden enlightenment. I could just, say Namo Amitabha a few times and wango bango, But no, it's really, we are retraining our mind. And our mind has all sorts of old condition, old habits. Yeah. And we first have to notice what these are and then apply the antidotes to them. So just noticing them is already making tremendous progress, and we should give ourselves a pat on the back. But noticing them alone doesn't free us of them. Yeah, we have to start counteracting them. And that's where the hard work really begins, because it's difficult sometimes to change old habits. And yet, and this is why it's so important to remember the disadvantages of our old habits and our afflictions and the benefits of counteracting them. If we remember those benefits and disadvantages, then we'll have more energy and we'll apply ourselves more to encouraging our good qualities, overcoming the old habits. Yeah. But if we don't really reflect on the benefits, then the power of habit just kind of takes us away very often. Mm-hmm. So it's important to constantly remember what our aims are, what our goals are, where we want to go in our practice. Yeah. And not just sit there with, here I am, stuck. That doesn't do much for us. Okay? So if your mind is pure and bright, you have arrived at the stage where no obstacles of adventitious afflictions are in your way. Yeah, so we can get there. And not only Amitabha will come to lead you to rebirth in the Pure Land. Yeah, you think Amitabha is going to come flying in the sky here? Yeah, when the first one of us dies and knock at the front door and say, I've come to take so-and-so to the Pure Land, hand her over. Yeah, it's not that. It's, our mind inside, our own wisdom, combined with the enlightening activity of Amitabha. So it's a mutual effort. It's a combined effort. Amitabha's not just sitting there twiddling his thumbs. Buddhas are active and they're trying to benefit us, but we have to be open to receiving their benefit. Okay, so Amitabha coming to benefit us is, our opening our own wisdom mind and our own compassion mind. And then the influence, the enlightening influence, or the blessings, the inspiration of the Buddhas can touch us. And will be reborn in the Pure Land. And all the Buddhas throughout the 10 directions will praise you. I've often wondered about this, because when they list the benefits of bodhicitta, one of them is that all the Buddhas will praise you. And I don't know, that's never something that has appealed to me. And I realize, wow, for some people that could be just fantastic. Wow, the Buddha will praise me. Yeah. But I don't know why. Does that invigorate you? For me, it doesn't do much. Yeah. So this is, again, something that depends on people's dispositions and interests and stuff. So I'm interested in hearing from the people who are inspired by that.
Well, I'm not sure yet, but what it reminds me of is you telling us that it's important to care what the wise ones think.
Mm-hmm.
And so it might not come out as praise, but it might come out as something that is helpful. That's what came to mind.
Okay. So like the wise ones will support us. Yeah. That makes more sense.
Reminds me of the Heart Sutra, where the Buddha says to Avalokiteshvara, right? Good, old child of the lineage. It is like that. It is like that. So maybe that's what the praise will sound like, as in that you are behaving in line with the Dharma, or what you have spoken is in line with the Dharma.
Yeah.
And then have a lot of Buddhas saying that, yes, maybe. For people attached to praise like myself, maybe it helps.
I think it's meant to encourage us.
Yeah.
I think to be in line with the Dharma, the source of the Dharma within yourself responds to your alignment. I feel like the praise comes from the Buddha nature itself, which is the same Buddha nature that all the Buddhas have.
Yeah. So kind of ourselves approving of ourselves feeling good about ourselves. Okay, thank you. That's helped me. Yeah, so when he talked about the mind ground, that means the Buddha nature, and like I said before, it's the ground of samsara, the ground of nirvana. Okay, they often talk about the essence of the mind as the original nature, which means, again, our original face in Chan, or the emptiness of the mind. Okay, and then it says, due to different karmas, that original nature manifests in different forms, such as a human being or an animal. So I don't think it's exactly like the mind goes poof and comes out in a physical form, but we create karma by the mind, and that karma and what we're interested in, the craving and clinging in the mind, direct the mind towards different forms. So in that way, we can say the mind manifests in the form of a human being or of an animal, according to the karma that the mind creates. Okay? In terms of the defiled mind, the mind functions as the various types of consciousnesses, polluted consciousnesses, and in terms of the undefiled mind, it functions as the various kinds of wisdom of the Buddha. So if you think of like the 5 Dhyani Buddhas, each of them is correlated with a particular wisdom and also with a particular defilement. Yeah. So you can just see, there's our mind produces defilements, our mind produces different kinds of wisdom. So the masters in the Pure Land lineage say that the skillful means, that the Pure Land teachings are a reflection of the Buddha's skillful means to help sentient beings get beyond cyclic existence, because they say that that the smaller Amitabha Sutra is one of just a few sutras that the Buddha spoke spontaneously without somebody asking him a question first. Yeah, so they say because of that, it indicates that the Buddha felt that the teachings on the Pure Land were so important, and that he had to bring them up himself and teach them, because they were inconceivable just to ordinary beings who might possibly ask about them. Okay. And it's also saying the Buddha therefore gave this teaching about the Pure Land, especially for those of great wisdom, because without such wisdom, it is difficult to have no doubts about it. Yeah, which is interesting, because often nowadays people think of the Pure Land teachings, in meaning just have faith and recite Namo Ayin Tofu, and they think, oh, that's for the people of more modest faculties. But here, those in the lineage are saying, actually, it would take people of great wisdom because otherwise ordinary people would have a lot of doubts about the existence of the Pure Land. Yeah. So I find that interesting because, many people do have doubts, yeah, and about the existence of Amitabha's Pure Land, or about Amitabha's, when it says Amitabha will take you to the Pure Land. So I find this quite interesting because it's kind of the opposite of what several people, say now. Okay, it is hard to understand that the Pure Land is part of our true nature and arises from our mind, which is empty. That's definitely hard, isn't it? Yeah. So I think what it's getting at is understanding the Pure Land practice on a superficial level is not difficult, but really understanding its meaning on a deep level without having doubts about the emptiness of inherent existence of the mind, and without having doubts about the mind's ability to be involved in the creation of our experience and of our world, yeah, that is actually quite difficult, because it really requires a thorough understanding of emptiness, which, as we know, is not easy to come by. But the Buddha, seeing that some sentient beings were ripe for this teaching, then without being asked, he gave the teaching on the Pure Land. Okay. So while Amitabha's Pure Land is a reflection of our mind, just as any realm we're born into is a reflection of our mind, and yet, just as our world appears so real to us, any other realm we're born into appears real to us. And the Pure Land, for those of lower capacity, will appear very real. For those of higher capacity, it will appear as like an illusion. Yeah. Okay. So while Amitabha's Pure Land is a reflection of our mind, it is also a place west of here. And for that reason, it's called the Western Pure Land. Okay. So Western doesn't mean the Western world, okay? It means west of this particular world system. But when someone asked the Pure Land master, Ui, why it was in the West, okay, he pointed out that was a very foolish question, saying, if the land of great bliss were in the East, you would be asking why it is in the East. So isn't this just playing with words? And then he explained that from the viewpoint of other places, Amitabha's Pure Land is going to be in the East. Yeah? And so emphasizing here, again, the lack of inherent existence, East and West are mutually dependent. Neither one of them has its own essence.